Hi, everybody. I am author AJ Park, and I love to write fantasy. And so, one of the funnest things that I get to do is interview other fantasy authors. And so, today we have the really awesome opportunity to talk to AJ Norfield. And
Hi.
he is talking to us from the Netherlands, which is really cool. Um, and he was just telling me he's 6 feet 6 inches tall. So, good job. Can you write better from up there? You totally can, right?
Yeah, well, it's harder with less oxygen there, so yeah.
That's not really true, is it? It's just a myth. So that is really fun. We were talking about how the Netherlands has more tall people statistically than any other country in the world. So that is awesome. It's not pertinent to fantasy, but every hero in a fantasy novel is almost always tall. So there you
True.
go.
It's important facts.
It's important, right? So tell us more about your books and tell us, well, maybe start with how did you get started writing fantasy?
Yeah, sure. So, a couple of years ago, I really had the idea that I wanted to create something from a child's, era. I always was dabbling in creating comic books, drawing, that sort of thing. And I already had a love for fantasy and mainly dragons in particular.
Mm-hmm.
So I had in
That's
my
a
mind,
very important part of fantasy.
yes,
Everybody
exactly,
loves
exactly.
dragons.
Majestic dragons, and especially the dragons that have a connection with humans, like the either the mind reading or emotional connection. So for me, it was really like, okay, if I'm gonna write anything, it's got to be fantasy and it's got to be about dragons and so forth. So one
That's
time
awesome.
when my daughter was tiny baby, this like maybe 12 years ago, no, 11 now. She just turned 11. Um, she had stomach cramps like middle of the night. I'm walking back and forth in my house going like, oh god, I really need to sleep and so on. And it just hit me, the storyline just hit me on what I wanted to create, and I took it from there, started talking to people, plotting it out, really, yeah, really digging into it, what would make an interesting story and the different arcs in it and so forth. So yeah, that was really the start of it, and I started writing, and I never stopped.
That's awesome. So you were awake in the middle of the night and you came up with this great idea.
Yeah.
I have to confess the ideas I come up with in the middle of the night are sometimes not great. But
At least as long as you write them down and you can review them afterwards, you
right.
have some
Sometimes I'm like,
chances
wait,
to.
what did I write here? Anyway,
Yeah, exactly.
so
So
fantasy, I think fantasy is the best genre, right? Because we love the dragons and we love that whole concept. And so what would you say? Do you have a favorite moment in your story, or tell us more about what your story's about?
okay, so when I started with my complete story arc, so the series that I'm building up, um, I had different ideas about the different books in the series itself. First of all, I was just starting, so the first book was more like, okay, am I able to write a story? Am I writing a book? Am I able to achieve that? So maybe in that way, the first book is a little bit of a trope. It's the good guys against the bad guys. It has dragons in it, but I'm trying to give it very much my own little spin on what my background is. And my background is a lot in conservation and nature, biology, and so forth. So I really wanted to put that into the story itself. Um, then when you look at the story as it flows, the first book is kind of like one big chase. As things happen, they're constantly in danger. They have to get out of a situation to back to safety. But when the next book came along, I was able to dive a lot more deeper in the world building. It actually jumps to a different main character and different dragon in the second book. So that allowed me to play a lot with the different storylines and how there were parallels, but also not contradictions, but differences between those situations. where, you know, one person is really close with their dragon, the other person really had a tough time bonding with their dragon. And it was really fun to play around with those aspects and put them really against each other in the same book, which made interesting perspective in my personal opinion.
Well, it sounds great. I can't wait to read it. I haven't read it yet. I want to.
Yeah, so I really try to make every dragon very unique. I play around with the elements, and the dragons do have powers, a little bit of magic powers. The world itself doesn't really have any magic, like there's no wizards or anything like that. But the dragons natively, as there are creatures, they have certain influences over nature, and that kind of pours over into the humans that bond with them. So,
well, that sounds cool.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't wait to read it now. So does it have a really spectacular villain in it that they're fighting against?
Absolutely.
Great.
Yeah, there's a lot of darkness actually in the series as well. The first book is quite light in the way that the story goes, but the story darkens the further the series goes. The main villain is the Stone King, but as with, you know, big story arcs like that, the main villain is a little bit in the background for a long time, and it's much more one of his generals that is the main arch enemy of the main character in the books itself. He's like the direct threat to the survival of the squad that's being chased and that sort of thing. And
then
he's
you get a little
definitely
deeper.
dark.
You
Yeah,
get a little
exactly.
deeper as you go. That's great. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, that's fine. Because I think it's important to have those kind of villains that have multiple layers. And I really noticed that in the first book, it was difficult to get to those additional layers. So once I started on the second book, it was like, all right, I really want to dive deeper into the background of this villain. You know, why is he so evil? Why is his opinion of the matter in a particular way? And that's very interesting to then research and bring to the surface for the reader itself. So.
Well, it sounds great. So you just kind of get a little deeper as you go, and then you find out the man who's behind all of it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like what it's called, Shrek. You know, ogres are like onions. You peel away the layers.
Oh, we love that show. We watched that one a lot of times.
Yeah.
That's a good one. So what's next for you? What are you working on now?
So I did have a bit of a tough time the last couple of years. I hit a burnout with everything that was going on. So I've been trying to get back to a more healthy position. I don't know about you, but COVID and all the lockdowns, it really killed my creativity. It was really difficult to put something on paper. So at the moment, I am finishing up the next book, which is the fourth book in the series.
And how many do you plan for the series?
There's at least 2 more books planned out, but it will depend, like if there, you know, is it going to be 2 additional physical books, or is it going to be more physical books? Because like the second book that I created, so the first book is Windcatcher, which is a wind dragon. The second book is about Wavebreaker, so that's more around a water dragon. But the second book was so big when I finished writing it that I had to cut it in half. So book 2 is actually part 1 and part 2. So now I have 3 physical books. Yeah, exactly.
That's, you know, sometimes your story just grows in the telling, and you just have to make it bigger.
But then you have to think about the reader too.
Right. But, you know, readers, I think a lot of readers like a really big book.
Yeah, exactly. And fantasy, you know, it leans that way for it. It's good.
Right. But I think it's easier to split it out. Like, well, I don't know. I debated that too, because my book just came out. It's like 600 pages, because it should really be 2 or 3
nice
books.
And meaty.
It is meaty, but it didn't start out quite that big. But as we were editing it, she kept asking me, well, what about this? And what about that? And what happened while this was happening? And so, you know, what could I do? I just kept writing it. And then but we decided in the end to just leave it as one book.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's another story, but because there was no good halfway point to split it. It's not quite big enough to be 3 books, but it could have
Yes.
been 2 books, but it's got 3 distinct parts to it. And so there we are.
Yeah, no, that definitely has to work. You have to have that point where you can say, all right, this is either a good cliffhanger to end the first book, or that it really kind of rounds off as a mid arc, So yeah, I fully agree there. So yeah, that's the plan. Next
So
book
you're
is
working
coming
on it.
out hopefully soon.
Well,
But then
good.
after that, 2 more.
Well, that's awesome. So you've got a lot going on. That'll be great.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, it has been so good to have a chance to talk to you. We've had a really fun time chatting, even before we started the official interview, and hopefully we get to talk to you again soon and find out more about your work. And then we will include a link with this video so that everybody can find you and find your work and take a look. And anyway, so they'll be able to check you out too.
Excellent. Happy to have joined here. I'm looking forward to the 5 days of fantasy and see whatever pops up. And if people want to reach out, Goodreads, Twitter, it's all possible. Just come say hello and have a chat.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for taking the time to join us today.
No problem.
Have a wonderful day. Bye.
Cheers.